Alright guys, so what we have here for this little demo is we've got a Scalar I6 tape library. We've got a Veeam server that is talking to that tape library. We've got an ESX host and a virtual machine that's a Windows machine that we're going to back up and then destroy as if ransomware has corrupted it, and then do a restore. And throughout that process we'll show you some of these new features on the i6, Active Vault, Media Block, and Ransom Block. So that's kind of the lay of the land. What you see on the screen here right now is the Scalar i6, and it is divided into a couple of partitions. So the purple slots you see here, that partition, those slots belong to Veeam, as do the two tape drives you see here in the middle. Then the green, the bottom right, that's the Active Vault partition I'll describe in a minute. Up on top right, that magazine is divided between some cleaning tape slots, and traditional import-export slots are here in red.
It is kind of funny to think of, to use the vernacular of partitions when we're talking about physical locations for tapes, but visually when you look at it like this, sort of splayed out sideways for the library, it does just feel like logical blocks for parking data, right?
Yeah, if you weren't, we're sitting here in a room obviously looking at the machine, but if you were just across the internet working with your library, yeah, it's ones and zeros.
And Dave, from the Veeam perspective, I mean, you guys don't care, right, where the data goes, whether it's disk or tape?
Really don't. Don't write it in a different format. There's nothing special that we do. And as we begin to unpack what Active Vault is and the Ransom Block and Media Block, that's transparent to Veeam. It's entirely transparent to everyone, as we'll talk through in a little bit. So it's very seamless process.
All right, so let's keep going.
All right, so those the green slots, remember the Active Vault partition, that's a special one, and Veeam can't see that. In fact, no applications can see the Active Vault partition.
Dave, close your eyes.
That's right.
That's
and
right.
you see that there are no tape drives associated with it. So by extension, that means no data can be read or written to tapes in that partition. So it's a secure partition. It's not visible to applications.
So that's security layer 1 then. Well, I guess probably not 1. There's many before then, but that's
RBAC and everything.
Right. But
Yeah.
as part of this security schema, that's a pretty big deal to remove the ability of the backup application to even see that.
That's correct. And the real reason Active Vault exists, it's been around for a while, it's so that customers can keep their data safe by leaving tapes in the library where they're not subjected to dropping, dust, other environmental threats, etc.
And Dan, it's fair to say it's not just that Veeam can't see it, nothing else that can touch that library can see it either.
That's correct, yep. If we were to look at the partition configuration, which I won't bore you with, you'll see there's no medium changer associated with that. It doesn't advertise itself to the outside world. It's an internal system partition. And what'll happen with that is when Veeam exports a tape, tells the library, hey, put this in the IE because someone wants to remove it, the library will tell Veeam that it did that. It's going to lie to you, Dave, sorry.
Yep.
And it's really going to take and put that tape in the Active Vault partition. So Veeam is going to report that tape as being offline in a vault in the mountain somewhere, but it's still safely in the library.
Great.
So that's the library setup we've got here. And then, if we take a look at Veeam, we've got the library here with the drives and the media that we're going to use, and we've got a couple of backup jobs. There's one here that's going to copy a VM, do a full backup, and then after that completes, we have a tape copy job called Copy to Veeam Safety, and that's set up to run whenever a new backup is detected. So within a minute or so after the backup completing, that job will wake up, see a new backup file, kick off and make a copy to tape.
And not to advertise too much, Brian, but we've all heard of the 3-2-1 rule, right?
Yeah, you guys have been talking about that for the better part of a decade, I think.
And to be fair, it's not a Veeam specific thing.
Sure.
Right? It's just an industry standard best practice. But what Dan's describing there is essentially an automated, foolproof way to achieve your extra copies.
That's right. And then if we look in our vSphere console here, we've got a VM called it Ransom Block VM, just lack of creativity on my part, I guess.
Gets the point across for the demo.
Yeah, and then if we this is the console for that VM. It's just a Windows box that we're going to use. And I've got a notepad file here, and we can. This is the nothing up my sleeve part of the program, right?
Yeah, I always love how Notepad is the de facto standard for proving the backups work. It's that, or picture of a dog on the desktop or something.
Yeah. So I'm just going to throw some text in here. This is, Davis from Veeam, and we'll save this file. And then when we blow this VM away and restore it, I'll be able to prove to you, because you're so skeptical out there, that
Yes.
it's the same VM. So that is our configuration there. Now, there are a couple of other features to this library that I want to describe that are going to come into play here. And that is media block and ransom block. So we've talked about the active vault partition. If I go here to the library and look at the magazines, so the library is configured with storage slots in 4 what are called magazines, and these are 25 slot units that pull out from the front of the library.
Right, so the magazines, for those that don't follow the tape world all that closely, can physically be removed, and each one can hold 25 of these tape cartridges. In the model we're looking at, 100 cartridges total, right?
Right, this is the base unit for this model, and you can stack up expansions to fill a full rack. We're just going to use the baby one today. But if we look at magazines here, you'll see that this one here is configured with an air gap policy. And if we look at the partitions, we can look at our active vault partition.
By the way, it's such a minor thing, but the GUI's pretty friendly on this. We didn't even take a minute to stop and discuss that, because so much of this stuff historically has been difficult to access through Visual GUI.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, back when I started doing this, it was all net backup, and you were doing stuff with the command line. So this is kind of a luxury.
It's substantially better.
Yeah, it sure is. So we can see here that for this magazine, we've got 3 boxes checked: media block, sequester on full, and sequester on insert. So media block is layer 2 of the security here. And what that means is that once a tape goes into the active vault partition, it can't come out until somebody takes physical action at the library itself in the data center. So normally with active vault, library administrator just goes into the GUI, they can move the tape out of the active vault back to the application partition. But if you hypothetically say your environment's been compromised and an attacker's going after your backups, well, they might have access to your library too.
So it's can't be a remote bad actor.
That's right. So active vault does not protect against a sophisticated remote attack. So ransom block helps with that. Media block helps with that. Media block says once a tape goes into that active vault partition, it can't come out without physically ejecting the magazine and putting the magazine back in. It is a logical lock. It's done in software. So these last 2 checkbox options here, sequester on full, sequester on insert, those have to do with ransom block, and that's really layer 3. That's the absolute airtight security here. What happens is when you sequester a magazine, it gets partially ejected, and you'll see later here there's a stop on the front of the library. That magazine gets ejected, I don't know, it's maybe a centimeter, maybe a little less. That makes it physically impossible for the robot to pick those tapes. So tapes in a sequestered magazine are absolutely 100% protected against remote attack, because the robot doesn't even know how to grab them. A bonus is they can still be seen by the barcode scanner. So you can go to your library UI and you can see that your tapes are all safe and secure and healthy, but they're safe.
And Dan, this is pretty new, right? This came out like 4th quarter or something last year?
Yeah, this is a pretty new feature, and it's actually been really popular. Customers love it. We've got some hyperscalers that are just the most skeptical people in the world. They're software guys. They know how vulnerable software is. So to have a physical block like this really helps them sleep at night.
And not to diminish the engineering involved, but it's a it's one of those things that's so simple when you look at it. It's a little piece of plastic or metal in the front that just kind of holds the magazine in,
Yep.
but it a couple millimeters or whatever, just enough to quite literally physically air gap these things.
That's right, and we do have a patent application pending on that, and lots of other features of the Scalar tape libraries. But I picture some engineer waking up in the middle of the night screaming because he just realized how he can do this. I don't know how it really happened, but
But it's cool, to your point,
Yeah.
Brian, because it's drive independent. So any generation of LTO is going to work with this.
that's right. And since it's transparent to applications, there's nothing that has to be aware in the ecosystem for this to work. So we will show you the whole workflow of how that works. So let's go ahead and do a backup.
It must protect that critical notepad file.
That's right. That's just
I would say in our
Shuttered
environment, we probably have a couple hundred VMs backed up that actually do almost nothing, but we just,
Back them up
back
again.
them all up anyway.
Yeah.
It's just easy. Throw them in the batch. No problem.
Not better than the opposite.
well, exactly right. Better to have more backups than you need than not enough.
So this is the primary backup job going right now. We're going to see that VM start to get backed up. Small VM, you could see there.
And our local repository is on the F drive here. So when I take off my white hat, put my black hat on, one of the things I'm going to do is just blow away everything on this F drive to destroy our backups.
And that's not so uncommon anyway from a ransomware perspective. Either they'll lock it, or if they're real nasty, destroy it. Or, I mean, we've all seen this. Kevin's done this in our lab. The oopsies, I deleted the wrong
Right.
thing. How easy is that to do?
Very true.
Well, that's an interesting point, Dan, because this isn't just a cyber threat. This is, a safety feature any way you look at it.
Right. Yeah, humans are the most dangerous thing in the data center, no matter how you slice it.
That's my old joke about tape. The most unstable thing about tapes are the humans handling it.
Yeah, that's why we like to keep them in the library in a climate-controlled room,
Plexiglass on.
So
in
you
a
can see the
nice,
robot.
secure metal rack, except for today.
So to Dan's point about that copy job is going to kick off automatically. You can see kind of in the middle of the main pane there, next run, it's continuous. So someone doesn't have to take any action. It's as soon as that job recognizes something else is completed or landed successfully, that'll kick off. And we're just about there, probably updating the metadata. The actual data payload's probably complete. It's just now like tracking and audit information.
Okay, and that initial backup to disk is done.
Oh, it started its thing already in the background. Okay.
Yeah,
I hear those servos whine.
that's right.
This is where tape's still pretty handy from a performance standpoint. Nice sequential reads and writes.
Oh yeah.
That's actually the funny thing historically about tape. People would say, is it fast enough? And actually the problem was it was faster than most backup applications could really deal with. So you had to reposition and backcatch. It wasn't infrastructure slowing you down per se, or that piece of infrastructure slowing you down.
Right. If you try to use it like a random access device, like with LTFS or something, then it shows the other side of its personality, and you see pretty quickly it's really not disk.
Right. But it's still great that you can go direct.
Absolutely.
Right? So you can actually see our throughput is higher here than it was on disk, at least the disk that we're using.
Right.
Because if you recall, that was in the, 97, or it was somewhat
80s to 90s.
Yeah.
Yeah, a little less than 100. Now all we need to do is throw some SSDs in the tape library so they can have a recovery, spin up the VMs on the tape library, rehydrate the SSD.
Yeah.
Working on any SSD tape hybrid systems?
Oh, if it were, I couldn't tell you.
Yeah.
But we already had a tape system with a server blade in the back. You could do things like run a key manager on or things like that.
Well, actually, and even a Veeam
A tape proxy.
Yeah.
That's right.
So similar kind of thing here. The I/O, meaning the data payload's complete. There we go. Now
We're doing the export right now. So Veeam is telling the tape library, put that tape in the import-export slot. And the tape library is lying to it and saying that it's doing that. And then I'll show you in a minute where that tape really went.
another example of virtualization, a little redirection under the cover.
That's a nice, polite way to put it, Alex. Okay, so if we go back and look at our library, and remember how to decode this diagram here. Each color is a partition, and purple is Veeam, and green is Active Vault. You'll see we've got two tapes in the Active Vault partition now. And one of those was just put in there by that export and redirect. And you see the red slots for import-export slots, there's nothing in there.
So Veeam's happy, and you're happy, customers protected.
Yep, as far as the level 1 goes. And
Right.
remember, we've got media block on, so you're protected with level 2 as well. It's not possible to move these tapes out of this magazine back to Veeam without touching the library physically. So let's show you that. Go back here to partitions, Active Vault. I have to select the partition. And I can say export. And I'm going to say I want to take one of these tapes and I want to export it out of the Active Vault partition for re-import back into the Veeam partition. Click apply. Oh, nothing happened. Well, that's by design. That's because media block is on.
So it'll let you go through the process, but just will not comply with
It just won't do it.
the order.
Now, about physically touching the library. So I'll go ahead and eject that magazine.
Dan is walking over to the machine. He's looking very angry at it.
He looks kind of like a bad actor right about
Yeah,
now.
he is the bad actor. He's pressed the eject button
So I wore the black sweater today.
on the bottom right magazine.
Okay, now. That magazine is sequestered. And I pop it back in. The robot says, no, you're not allowed to do that. Pops it back out.
I'll get it. All right, so you tried to put it back in. The magazine's been sequestered, so it kicks it back out. So
That's right.
what's the process to onboard that?
Right, so how do you get it back in? Well, before we do that,
Because I could sit there and push it in and all day long and keep throwing it out, right?
that's right.
Okay.
So that protects you against, anybody accidentally walking into the data center and saying, oh, this thing shouldn't be like that. Putting it back in.
The casual walk by, pop
Yeah.
it back in.
Or somebody doing it on purpose, right? You have to go to the library GUI and do an insert request. But before we do that, so we've got this backup of this VM. It's protected. We've got Active Vault for level 1. We've got media block so the tape can't come out for level 2. And now we've sequestered that magazine for the ransom block feature. And if you can't get to the library, you can't touch that backup. So let's burn down our VM and burn down the backups, just for fun.
Just for fun.
The
That's what we do
exciting
on a
part.
snowy day.
That's right. Well, I guess the first thing that a bad actor is going to do if he's feeling frisky is he's going to go and he's going to delete your backups before he encrypts your
So that's
stuff.
the Veeam backup repository on disk that we're wiping out.
Exactly. This is that Veeam backup repository. So those backups are gone.
Dave, you nervous yet?
No, I have faith.
I'm
Oh.
nervous. And then we're going to go, where was I here? Into vSphere.
So now we're
We're going to prove it's dead.
That's
we're
right.
living on the edge.
This is our VM here, and I am going to, and then I'm going to do the unthinkable. I'm going to say delete from disk.
There we go.
And it's all virtual, right? So it's frighteningly quick, and that VM's gone.
But that could be easily scripted by a ransomware application that weasels its way into your hypervisor and just starts canning stuff, right?
That could be 100 VMs with 100 disks in seconds.
Gone that fast.
Yep.
So the backup is gone, the VM is gone.
All we've got left is our backup on tape. Tape's sitting there in the tape library.
Tape's waiting to save the day. This is the hero moment.
Right?
Yeah.
3, 2, 1.
So I'm going to go here to the operations pane for this magazine and send an insert request. And you can see on the front of the library that the light on the button on that magazine is flashing orange and green. So if you are tape operator at unnamed hyperscaler and you're looking down a row of 100 of these libraries,
You've got an indicator.
you know which magazine you need to go push in. So I'm going to do that.
All right, so Dan's going to go over to the library, reinsert the magazine. A little push, then the robot's going to do its thing. Now, Dan, is it going through and scanning now that it can see all the tapes? Well, it could see all the tapes before. Even when it's ejected that little tiny bit, it can see the barcodes on those tapes, but it can't physically grab them and move them.
Correct. So anytime you insert a magazine, the library does an inventory. So it's scanning up and down the columns.
All right, so the magazine's back in, the robot's doing an inventory. It's zipping around in there.
And you notice it didn't pop that door back out.
Right. That works because you're a privileged user.
And I told it to accept an insert request.
Okay.
But I had to touch the library
Right.
to make that happen, so not remote attackable. So now,
So right, that's an important distinction here in that you need the physical access to go back in and touch it, which means you're an approved badged user to your data center, et cetera, and so
Right.
forth. So your physical security of the building in addition to all the software features that we've looked at so far.
right.
Yeah,
So
you're not even just in the building. You are literally standing right next to that tape library, and it's a privileged user that allowed that to even happen.
Right.
Right, and in a lot of data centers too, some of this infrastructure will be sub-secured within the data center itself.
So now back on the partition screen, we'll select our Active Vault partition. And we're going to say export like we did before. We'll say export for re-import into the Veeam partition.
And by the way, as fast as our data was manipulated by bad actors, I mean, this is surprisingly speedy to get back online. I mean, we're not done yet, of course, but the steps are happening. If you were in a crisis mode, everyone would feel good about the progress occurring.
Right, the executive who's standing over your shoulder, breathing on your neck.
Right.
And, I used to be in corporate IT. I've been that guy. Not the executive,
The
unfortunately. I've
breather
been
or
the
the-
guy, the breathee. I've been the breathee.
But not only is it fast, it's not difficult if you have privilege.
Right.
I think that the ease of use is a good point. And I was crediting the GUI on the quantum side earlier, but the Veeam GUI has been dead simple for years to work through.
Yeah, and the library physically indicating push me in now. There might be situations where you're not dealing with your primary staff.
Well, that's a good point too. Yeah, an amber blinky light. Go to that one, find
Right.
the thing that looks like it's popped out. And if you were in a situation where there were several of these and you pushed in the wrong one, it would kick it back out if you had those
That's right.
security features enabled.
That's right. And I should mention, too, we've got the security on this thing cranked up to 11 for the demo. Not everyone is that paranoid. So you could just choose to use Active Vault or just use Active Vault and Media Block, or you can use all three. It's really up to the individual organization. So we have moved those tapes, and I'll show you where they went.
Oh yeah, so if
you
you
look in
saw
the
the
red
grayed out
slots.
version, you see it now. It's obvious.
Yeah, so they're in import-export slots, which is where we told Veeam we put them originally, and then removed them. So let's go back to Veeam. Let's look at the tape infrastructure. and we are going to import tapes. And this just tells Veeam, hey, go look at the import-export slots because I got something for you.
So Dave, from a Veeam perspective, you're sitting here waiting for the robot to go take a look, see what's in there, and then
Right.
from the Veeam perspective, what happens from then?
So we don't have to even know what that tape is, you know, the barcode or the serial associated with that tape. To Dan's point, Veeam's now just been instructed, go see if there's anything there. We saw, because we saw the library partition manager, that there are going to be some things there. So Veeam is now just going to ask the library, okay, go look. And if you find something, then I want to be able to catalog that in the Veeam side. So once this completes now, we're going to see that Veeam has access or visibility to those as well. So it will essentially represent a complete undo of what we've done, and then we can power up that, or restore that VM powered up and prove our point. But you know, Dan, you were saying, you know, you don't have to use all these things. I mean, I don't know why you wouldn't use ActiveVault, Media Block, Ransom Block in combination with one. If you're going to go that far, it's like, why not have a seatbelt and airbags?
Yeah, I feel the same way, but you know, there's always this tension between security and convenience.
Yes.
And
Convenience is often the counterbalance, right?
that's right. Every organization has to choose where on that spectrum they want to be, because as easy as this is, there are some steps here that you don't have to do if you don't feel you need the security features. So that's really up to you. But I'm with you. It's thinking back to when I worked for, you know, a big bank as an IT guy. I worried about backups all the time, and this would have made me worry a lot less about backups.
Right. I mean, this is literally your last line of defense. Why not put a little
Right.
more insurance policy on it?
So we've done that import now. And, you know, just for fun, go back to the library and show you that the import-export slots in red are now empty.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
So those tapes have been moved. So Veeam makes it really easy to restore those backups. So what we're going to do here is we're going to copy the backup copy off tape back into the on-disk repository, from which we can then restore the VMs. Okay. We're going to send this back to the repository it came from,
The one that we blew away.
the one that we blew away on F, and hit finish. And now we can go get a cup of coffee, and when we come back, our backups will be in place back on the F drive.
So, Ryan, what's happening there is probably self-descriptive, but you know, Veeam's looking to see what is it that I need to pull off of tape from an individual object perspective, asking, in this case, the tape infrastructure, okay, go make yourself available to start sending data over. So that's being loaded up right now from the I6 library, and then we'll start writing back to our primary backup landing pool of disk.
This is kind of when it's nice to have your backups local, your tape local, because for as much as the cloud is neat and easy for things like this level of the your one offsite or your one, what's your 321, the last
That's
one?
right, the last
Okay.
one is offsite.
Right.
Yeah,
So,
that's right.
I mean, the cloud is great for that, but if you're in this scenario, to have a relatively quick local copy is pretty strong.
Yeah, we're going to wait minutes here. We're not going to wait hours or days or weeks to try and suck everything
Well,
back.
if you,
from the
yeah, I
cloud.
mean, we're talking about one VM, but if you're talking
Right.
about hundreds to
Yeah.
haul all that down,
Right.
Right.
Well, and that's why the law of physics, to your point, come into play. I mean, that's the very definition of why snowball and snowmobile exist, is because bulk transport becomes more efficient. That's not a negative statement.
just is.
It's just a fact.
Yeah.
And that's why it's beneficial to have one or more copies locally, as well as a safety copy somewhere else.
Mhm. Yeah, so in this model, it wouldn't be unusual or wrong to have a cloud copying is probably a good overall strategy, because if something happened
Absolutely.
to the structure, if this were to burn down or whatever,
That's right.
you still want to be able to have that. But to have this level of security on a local copy that can still come back and be rehydrated and used this quickly and with this level of operation simplicity, that's a really nice interim spot from your primary backup to your tape and then to cloud.
Right, and remember in the old days, you would have been taking tapes out of a library, putting them in a bin for a provider to come pick up and storing them out in somewhere. And that's all just a big pain in the rear, and the cloud has eliminated that.
Right.
Now the tapes can stay on site. You've got your offline copy protection, but it's local, and you're not shipping stuff back and forth in a truck.
Well, that's a good point. I mean, not to date myself, but if you think back to 2005 Hurricane Katrina, there were Iron Mountain trucks stuck on the interstate.
Yep.
So tape left the data center, but could not arrive at the target
secure
location,
facility.
right? And that's not a fault of the process. It's just environmentals kicked in.
Sometimes it breaks.
Yep.
What's the process if these backups span multiple tapes in terms of loading? It'll just go sequentially?
Yeah, Veeam is aware of how many tape drives are in the library, so it's going to load up all the tape drives. If you've got multiple tapes and you've got more tapes than tape drives, it'll take the first 3, if there's 3 drives, load them up, and then just go from there, sequence through them. But one of the key things with sizing is to determine how many tape drives you need, and part of that's based on what and how much you think you're going to restore and how often. You could easily have a system, if you needed it, with dozens of tape drives.
Right. So we're back on disk now.
Okay, that one's completed. And that means if I go and I look at our F drive, look, we've got a backups folder again,
Huzzah.
and it's got a Veeam backup file in it. So
Things
we're
are looking up for you,
feeling
Dave.
pretty
Yeah.
good about this. We might be able to get this this notepad file back.
I don't want to have to recreate that text
You know
document.
how long that took?
from scratch.
Yeah.
Been here all week working on that. So for this recovery, this backup that we recovered shows up here under disk imported. And this is the one we want to restore. We're going to restore the entire VM.
It's because sadly we're not just missing a file.
That's right.
That's the
Missing
nature of
all
bad
of it.
actors. They don't discriminate. They took it all out.
Yep.
But fair point, Brian, if I think about it, in even a cyber scenario, the ultimate goal would be bring everything back. But, the boss breathing down your neck may say, look, Brian, I just need you to bring back payroll right now. I don't care about everything else. Give me this
time
one thing.
sensitivity
Right.
for whatever the
Right,
process
whatever the
is.
priority is. Ultimately bring it all back, but I just need this process or this app or
Yeah,
this VM.
for expediency, you may just need
Yep.
parts. Yeah, that's a good point.
And something I'll point out here that I learned this week about Veeam, I didn't realize this capability was here. If you were recovering from ransomware, you're probably going to want to scan for malware
Yes.
on this restored machine before you fire it up. So,
Yes, if you're recovering from a bad attack, then it would make sense, wouldn't it?
yeah, you want to know, were my backups compromised a week ago, a month ago, and you may have to go back to an older backup.
What does this look like, Dave? Are you seeing good attach here in terms of customer happiness and success with finding things on this part?
Yeah, we are, and it's a combination of things, as you might imagine. So, a little Veeam commercial about 11 years ago, Veeam pioneered instant recovery, and this is a subset of that. You can see on the screen, it's called Secure Restore. So we're taking this instant recovery, but before we take this, in this case, a virtual machine, and present it back to production, where it's network attached, to Dan's point, could reintroduce day zero threats. You can go and download the malware antivirus of your choice. Sadly, a lot of people are down level on their signatures, so make sure you're up level on those definitions, and then run a scan while we're still in this middle state, meaning that VM hasn't, and all of its associated data hasn't been put back into production.
In a compromised state.
in a compromised state. So we know we're clean going back into production. And there's some things you can do. I mean, it's as simple as just a checkbox to say enable this, and then it's just a radio button to say if we find something bad in conjunction with your anti-malware, anti-ransomware, what do you want us to do? You want us to fail? Do you want us to try to go through everything, I mean the whole restore point, and see if that could be corrected by the software? And then, do you want to just abort and say, you know what, we don't have time to deal with this right now, let's get on to the next thing.
Okay.
Right, so I'm going to leave that unchecked. Hit next. And here's the summary of what's going to happen when I hit finish. I'll choose to power on the target VM.
Dave, do you ever get tired of seeing people save themselves like this with V?
No, I mean, unfortunately, it used to be we only restored like 3 to 5% of the data we backed up, and the trick was you didn't know which 3 or 5% or when, right? So
Right.
you had to back up frequently. Now, as we're seeing, or kind of mocking through right now, a cyber event could literally be 100% of your data has to come back, and the consequence of not being able to do that is maybe the difference between being in business and
And yeah.
Very easily, yeah.
Again, I'll point out, tape had a faster throughput than disk does in our environment. And we did not purposely cripple the throughput of disk. by the way.
No, it's, we're using a lab server that's had 9 lives, maybe more. So it's probably not the fastest thing in the building.
Yeah, but that's reality.
That is reality.
Yeah, honestly, it is, yeah.
And especially in this pandemic age, now that everyone has budget to keep refreshing things. Or if you even had the budget, can you get that gear?
I mean, it's almost the other way. We're seeing a lot of customers, serious customers, have to go find old gear, whether it's on some refurb site, a server refurb, or eBay, or whatever, to be able to kind of kludge some of these things back together to deal with their growth, or whether they need some specific NICs or whatever it is. Some of these things are very difficult to locate. Do you have, so for these protection technologies, do you guys roll them up in a broader branding message or some other umbrella?
Nice leading question, I like that. Yeah, we call it the Scalar Security Framework. And there are these 3 pieces we've discussed, and there's some other things like media security notifications. So if you've got an inside bad actor who goes and removes tapes from a library in the middle of the night, your admin's going to get an alert about that. Plus all the usual role-based authentication, things like that. So there are a whole lot of things under that umbrella of security that we sort of think of all together. And it's not any one piece of that's important. It's having everything covered so that your backups are really protected. And data integrity is another part of data security really as well. We have features in the Scalar libraries that will periodically take your tapes that haven't been accessed for a defined period of time and scan them and make sure that the data on those tapes is still good. And the worst time to learn that a tape is degraded or suffered damage is when you're trying to restore data from it, and you find out then that it's bad. So our data lifecycle management tools allow that automated scrubbing to happen on your schedule as you specify, so you know when you need those backups, they're there.
Good data hygiene processing.
Yeah.
Again, don't you think that whole notion of bit rot on tape is way overplayed? I mean, the actual durability of tape exceeds that of other media.
It does in a lab. It's when you get it out into the real world and you've got some guy sanding drywall in your data center.
Right.
Sounds like our data center.
Things happen, and environmental conditions are part of it. And it also depends on how many passes that tape undergoes. Eventually the tape's going to wear out. And it's all these things that you can't predict and just say, I'm going to replace tapes every X days or years. It's much better to do that periodic testing so you know that tapes are good, or you know that they're starting to get a little funky. Replace them before you lose data. So our restore is done here, according to Veeam.
Okay, now I am getting nervous.
Let's go back into
This is the time.
vSphere and see if we can find And it shows up here in Discovered Virtual Machines. There's our Ransom Block VM, and it's powered on
Thanks to that handy little checkbox on the restore, right?
thanks
Yeah.
to that checkbox.
And it's such a tiny little thing. It's
But it's
almost
easy.
like almost like a little throwaway, but I mean, why not?
Yeah.
Exactly.
Saves you a couple steps, and by the time you get around to vCenter, it's already back.
Right. But literally, because we were talking, so we actually, maybe we know exactly what to do, but we were chatting and we didn't have to go and do something manually and wait just a few more extra seconds and have it. Now, no big deal for one, but what if that had been 100 VMs?
That's right. Of course, Server Manager always pops up. Get that guy out of the way. You're seeing this because we yanked the cord.
Why did you shut me down so violently?
That's right.
I thought we were friends.
This is.
You know,
Oh, it's there.
we go.
and that critical notepad file,
Which could never have been recreated in a timely manner.
no, never, is back.
And so what? It was. I didn't time it, but what do we? 14, 15 minutes or so to go through the whole process of killing our backups, ejecting our tapes, going through all that, remounting, giving it back to Veeam, doing the restore. It was pretty painless and relatively speedy compared to alternate backup methods.
Yeah, I think that's pretty straightforward. And between the ease of use on the i6 and the ease of use of Veeam, you could do this even with that executive breathing down your neck, which no one ever performs their best under that kind of pressure. So the easier this is, the more likely you are to be successful when it's really important.